Good afternoon, and welcome to UCL's Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose, IIPP, which was founded and is directed by Professor Mariana Mazzucato, who holds the chair in Economic Innovation and Public Value. The Institute brings together an interdisciplinary group of academic staff and collaborators to rethink how public value is created, nurtured, and evaluated. The Institute revives the notion of public value and public purpose to the center of political, economic, to the political economy and to concrete policy practice. The Institute equips leaders to co-design growth in innovative-led, sustainable, and inclusive manners. I am grateful to our Deputy Director, Rainier Kettle, who is a Professor of Innovation and Public Governance, for his support and leadership with the Cultural Justice Seminar Series. Cultural justice offers a lens through which we consider how and to what extent racial, social, and economic and digital injustice has an impact on Black British life, and explores approaches that can help promote equality and remove barriers to opportunity. My aim is to take into account the values that inform people's opinions while providing a healthy and brave space for debate. The Cultural Justice Series will explore a range of social justice themes focusing on the interaction of power and inequality. On May 12th, we presented our first Cultural Justice Series lecture, Black Wealth Creation. How can Black British wealth creation help the overall British economy? With Gavin Lewis, the Managing Director of BlackRock UK. We looked at both an academic, economic, and cultural justice standpoint on the creation of Black wealth and why it is vital to the overall economy based upon the Black British Wealth Creation Report that was released in November of last year between UCL Culture, Black Britain Beyond, and the Economic Leadership Council. If you'd like to find more information on that report, please visit www.blackbritainbeyond.org.uk to access a copy. And on June 14th, we will explore valuing the Black pound, patterns and motivations of Black British wealth giving, which is from a forthcoming evidence-based study seeking to understand the motivations, aims, and patterns of Black philanthropy in the UK and to identify further ways to galvanize Black giving. Today, we are here to present this lecture on the digital revolution, how to come out of the Black digital hole. Today's emerging technologies, such as the IoT, robotics, and AI, have been huge drivers and are towards the future. According to PwC, the UK GDP will be up to 10.3% higher in 2030 as a result of AI, and the equivalence of the additional $232 billion. Black Britons have long faced barriers that have often prevented them from effectively being able to start and scale companies, including in the digital sector. Given the disproportionate value that will be generated by these technologies, it is crucial that we find ways to avoid the widening of the existing racial wealth gap. Our aim today is to explore and examine approaches and strategies to ensure equal access into the digital sector for Black talent, addressing the issues from education opportunity to entrepreneurship, and spending quite a bit of time understanding cryptocurrency. Today, I'm delighted to have Ije to join me. She is a finance, security, and regulatory lawyer with extensive experience advising global banks and corporate clients in the US, Europe, Central Asia, and Africa. She is a co-director of the Digital Economy Institute, a digital currency think tank, and a limited partner of ImpactX Capital Partners, an ESG-focused venture capital fund. Until recently, she was executive director and digital currency risk management lead at JP Morgan, focusing on developing the firm's digital currency risk management framework and advising on crypto-related business proposals. She was also the co-chair of JP Morgan's EMEA Black Leadership Forum, which advised the business on the recruitment, retention, and advancement of Black employees, and a member of the board of Aldermanbury's Investment Limited, a JP Morgan subsidiary. I could go on. She has done remarkable work, and I'm grateful that she's here. She holds her first degree and an MBA from New York University and a JD from Cornell University. Thank you, EJ, for joining me.
Thank you.
It has been quite frequently stated that the COVID-19 pandemic has widened the digital and social divide. However, we know that long before the pandemic, digital poverty has been looming. In an increasingly digital age, those who are not engaged effectively with the digital world are at risk of being left behind. Some arguably even left behind farther than others. As technology is leading, it means that digital skills are increasingly important for connecting with others, accessing information and services, and meeting the challenging demands of the workplace and economy. The digital divide between those who have access to information and communication technology and those who do not gives rise to inequalities in access to opportunity, knowledge, service, and goods. This deepens poverty and for some citizens creates a digital black hole. In the digital world, banking, democratic functions, job applications, benefits, and other public services are increasingly being moved online. Digital skills, equipment, and reliable digital connectivity are crucial to enabling people to fully participate in society and engage in 21st century education, employment, and economic systems. Tackling the digital divide is important to leveling up in every community by ensuring that everyone has the skills and equipment they need to thrive. Based on the UK's government report from 2020, the UK has the largest internet economies in the developing world, contributing over 8% of the GDP. Since the mid-1990s, the importance of digital inclusion has been highlighted by the UK government, and policies have been implemented as a view to understanding how to access digital technology, infrastructure, and skills to allow all people to harness the opportunities that they bring. And yet, in 2018, 5.3 million people in the United Kingdom remain digitally excluded. Furthermore, according to Lloyds Bank UK Consumer Digital Index 2020, 21% of the UK's population, 11.7 million people, did not have essential digital skills outlined in the government's Essential Digital Skills Framework. Here at the Institute, Honorary Professor Hilary Cotton released a report in 2020, Welfare 5.0. Why do we need a social revolution and how to make it happen? In the report, she states, our social systems are in crisis both because they cannot address modern suffering and because they are deeply connected to economic, political, and ecological systems which are also in trouble. She further brings to bear that we are living through a, quote, technology revolution, unquote, which started in 1971 with the intention of microchips and is now accelerating rapidly to embrace robots, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology. And it cannot be understood unless we see it in parallel to, or in some ways, separate from our social challenges. Technology is in all that we do. Technology is affecting every aspect of how we live, how we parent, how we learn, how we work, how we eat, how our communities are organized. It is creating new forms of wealth and new forms of poverty. It is unsettling the borders between nations and between human beings and machines. And it is currently, in its form, creating an unsustainable process of human and natural existence and extraction. Here in the United Kingdom, the Black Asian minority ethnic, I don't like to use the word BAME community has been disproportionately infected by the virus. According to JISC, the Joint Information Systems Committee report, exploring the impact of digital and data poverty on BAME learners, it chose to address the critical issues that are socially impacting digital exclusion and social disadvantagement, saying that it goes hand in hand. They reveal that people in the poorest households are at least 4 times more likely to be digitally excluded. The pandemic has worsened the digital divide and, quote, risk turning the problem of digital exclusion into a catastrophe of the loss of education and opportunity to the poorest and the most vulnerable. The impact of the pandemic exacerbated poverty in the UK. By August 2020, 4.6 million households were receiving universal credit, an increase of nearly 90% from the start of the year. The groups being hardest hit, guess for who? Lone parents, mostly females, and those who are in, quote, the BAME community. The poverty rate is twice as high for BAME groups as for white groups, which suggests that BAME groups overall are more disproportionately affected by all that's going on since the pandemic, and digital and data poverty is clearly linked to the lack of access. The challenges are many, and we don't have to go through them all. But what the report reveals was the lack of access to suitable devices and software, reliable and affordable connectivity, learning spaces, digital skills, and mental health and anxiety. And last but not least, learning engagement and outcomes, the things that are lacking as an element of the pandemic and the digital divide. Having said all that, I want to think about solutions and not the problem. And EJ, for you, I'm wondering, with all that I've shared, could digital currency be one of the leading solutions to this black hole?
Short answer.
Well, that is my big question for you that is broad. But before we get into this whole idea of digital currency and what it represents, I would like for you to share with us the Digital Economy Institute. I know that it's an independent think tank dedicated to promoting the understanding of an effective policy for digital ledgers and cryptocurrency and other digital economic applications. What is its aim and its focus?
So it was founded by cryptocurrency enthusiasts who understand traditional finance, and most of them come from traditional sectors. But understanding that there's a lack of a comprehensive legal framework anywhere in the world for this new creation, this new economy, I would call it. And it's supposed to bring together people from cross centers, economists, lawyers, accountants, technologists, to come up with solutions, public policy solutions, both in the US and the UK. That's the focus. To propose policy to put in place some common sense legislative framework that actually will not stifle innovation, but also protect consumers, and also look to minimize the risk of it causing any kind of financial, well, basically to ensure that it doesn't impact financial stability across those jurisdictions as well.
Brilliant. So let's go a little deeper, if that's okay. Since the inception of Bitcoin in 2009, the concept of digital currencies and blockchain has turned the world upside down. The industry has been generating a buzz around its potential to shake up the entire economic and financial landscape of the world market. As cryptocurrency is making headlines with its massive success and profit-generating capabilities, and recently some challenges, some global economists are starting to realize that cryptocurrency and blockchain can play a huge role in eradicating global poverty. With the accelerated growth in economic development, there's a lot there. Two things. Can you help us to understand the digital identity of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
Okay.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. Let's start, because let's level set a little bit. Let me start from blockchain stroke digital ledger technology. So it's a form, it's basically a ledger. It's a form of keeping records, it's a form of transferring, it's immutable. And it has traditional, what I would call traditional economy uses. And also it has uses within the crypto sector. So then going to cryptocurrency or crypto assets or digital assets, those are essentially secure digital representations of value or rights. And again, they're secure, they're immutable. Once something is put onto the blockchain, there'll always be a record of it. Then going down to the different types of crypto currency, I hesitate using that cryptocurrency because in some cases it's a misnomer, but that's what most people know it as. There are multiple different types. So there are the ones that I may call coins that are native to a blockchain. There are different types of blockchains. And they're native to a blockchain and they're meant to transfer value over the course of a blockchain. But they're also intended as a means of exchange on the blockchain. Then you have the non-native tokens, so to say, that are used for the same things, but they just are not affiliated with any native blockchain, but they can move around on existing blockchains. Then within those, there are payment tokens. Those are types of crypto assets that are used solely for payments. And they're ones that actually represent real-world assets, like, for example, Tesla. There are tokens that represent the likes of Tesla, and those are the ones that probably, I think, nobody would dispute that they come within the remit of existing financial regulatory frameworks. Then you also have other tokens that actually represent value on the blockchain that represent value on the blockchain but are not related to traditional world assets. You also have utility tokens, so kind of like gaming tokens that people use to play games on the internet.
Can I pause you?
Sure.
Our screen is off here. Is everything okay?
Everything's good.
Okay.
So then, coming back to another category, and I'll call them stable coins, I'll call them so-called stable coins, because I think some of the issues with this sector that people may be aware of that took place over the last couple of weeks, they fall within the type of tokens in this bucket, so-called stable coins. And the reason why I say that they're so-called stable coins, because if you look at the different types, they represent different things. The one that imploded, which is Terra/Luna, it basically was an algorithmic so-called stablecoin, meaning that it didn't really have anything backing. It was algorithms that were trying to maintain a peg to $1 US. And that essentially imploded and went all the way down to basically zero. But then you have like Fiat collateralized stablecoins, and Fiat is essentially government, the traditional money that we know, the UK pound or the US dollar. You have some stablecoins that are actually backed one-to-one by the US dollar. The most popular ones are all backed by or denominated in the US dollar. And you can see the reserves. They tell you that the reserves are with insured depository institutions or their treasuries, US treasuries, or high quality liquid assets. And then there are others where they're not like, there are others that are actually backed by other things, including corporate debt, which essentially if a company that issued the debt gets into trouble, then all of a sudden you run the risk of not being able to get the dollar that you gave them, the dollar you traded in for that stable coin. Why did stable coins come into existence? Because of the volatility of the other crypto coins. Basically, Bitcoin, you've seen the value go from $70,000 to, what is it now, less than $30,000. And at one point in time it was 20 and then 6. There's too much volatility in it. And the stable coins were created for people to be able to park their money in that digital economy. Because going back and forth between the traditional economy was very costly and it took too long. So if you sold something, you parked it in a stable coin waiting for the time when you needed to purchase something else. So that's how stable coins arose, and they become, I think it's probably about like $800 million worth of stable coins right now, given, yeah, it's about that. But you also have, to a lesser extent, commodity collateralized stable coins backed by gold. Those are less popular and you don't hear a lot about them. It's mostly the algorithmic stable coins, ones that imploded, and the fiat-backed stable coins. And the two largest are basically fiat or corporate debt-backed type stable coins called Tether and USDC. And again, they're all pegged to the US dollar.
Is it working?
Well, for what? That's the question. What is it working for? So that's my question to you. Is it working? Yes, it's working because well, people have made a lot of money, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
People have made a lot of money. People have lost a lot of money on it. One of the things that attracts people to it, I think, particularly some of the earlier people, is to kind of be able to operate because of all the money, the quantitative easing that occurred in the aftermath of the last financial crisis. There were people who were pissed off that, we were paying for the greed of a smaller sector of the population. And so some unknown person or group of people, we don't know, came up with the Bitcoin and the concept, and then there have been other developments within that sector since then. So you have right now thousands and thousands of different type of cryptocurrencies that exist out there.
Do you see this as a way forward as we talk about global poverty? Is there a niche here that can actually help to eradicate?
Potentially, I think, and it's still in its relative infancy. I think the potential for you to be able to transfer value from one person to another instantly with minimal cost, and potentially because you eliminate the intermediaries that take, of course, their fees. The potential that people who are the unbanked, as they call them, might actually be able to access financial services just from a mobile phone. It's that sort of, I think a number of people talk about the financial inclusion aspect, but also the cost of sending money. This could potentially eliminate some of those prohibitive costs.
So am I correct with everything that you said to say, since cryptocurrency are based on blockchain technology that is not controlled by any central authority or bank?
Not quite. I think it depends on the different types. So there are actually a couple of others I did mention, non-fungible tokens, which became very popular in the art world, and then also central bank digital currencies. So the central bank digital currencies, for example, those are basically digital representations of a sovereign's currency. That would be controlled. For example, the first ever central bank digital currency was issued by the Bahamas. It's called the Sand Dollar. And they're using it basically, they're controlling it because they're controlling it in the same way that they control the fiat version of that currency. Stable coins that I kind of discussed earlier, some of those are, the most popular ones definitely have some central counterparty there. People use the term decentralized a lot, but not everything is decentralized. If you actually look behind the curtains, you'll see that there is some kind of governance framework, some central body or group of people that are actually, I don't want to use the word manipulating, but at least have some kind of degree of control over it. Some, yes, are truly decentralized, but the way that term is thrown around, it's thrown around a little too much, and it doesn't apply to everything.
So then it would appear that there could be a lack of hope in this eradicating global poverty because of the lack of assurances.
Well, in my opinion, I don't think global poverty can ever be eradicated. I think it can be minimized, but eradication means not anything.
That's our next talk.
Yeah, that nobody will ever be poor in this world, and I don't foresee that in my lifetime. I think it can be minimized, and it should be minimized, but eradication is something like completely different. I think the potential for the digital economy to minimize global poverty, I think it definitely exists, because all of a sudden people having access to financial services that loans, for example, low-cost loans that they otherwise would not have had access to. You keep on hearing stories about people being denied financial services by banks that are already out there simply because of the color of their skin. The potential for the digital economy to eliminate, because it's peer-to-peer, you don't know who you're transacting with, so the potential to discriminate, it takes that away. As long as you can afford it, but it takes that away. So I think that this can potentially go some way to alleviating that, but I don't know that anything could eradicate poverty.
I believe in eradication. But we'll come back to that. So we're going to come to you all for questions in just a moment. Are there factors that could cause us to believe, valid factors that could cause us to believe that there's a way out of this, quote, black hole for black people? And I know we've discussed this, that there's this idea that black people are not investing or engaged with cryptocurrency. I'd like for you to speak to that.
Okay, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think that's anecdotal. For example, I think when we talk about non-fungible tokens, they exploded last year. But what this essentially does is allows artists, whether they're kids or adults who have been locked out of the system because galleries control, what artists have access to, some of the buyers. It allowed artists to put their work on platforms and be able to sell them without actually necessarily having to go through some of these gatekeepers. But what it also did was allow them to potentially reap the benefits of future sales. So, for example, their work sells for $10 or £10 today, but in the future it's worth $100 million. In the future, that subsequent sale, the NFT would allow them to actually reap the benefit of the increase in value of that. So that's actually helpful, and I think it helps all communities that have been locked out of traditional systems. On the other question that you had about black people potentially not having access to the system, I would disagree with that. And this is the reason why I would disagree with that. I mentioned the Bahamas. The Bahamas was the first. It's a country run by black people. It's mostly black. It's the first ever country to have created and put out for the public use central bank digital currency. The number 2 market for trading in cryptocurrencies is actually Nigeria, which is also another black country full of black people. The Economist came out with a report saying that there's a higher uptake of crypto among black Americans than white Americans. And actually also something else, I think a couple of months ago, the Central African Republic became the second country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. So I don't necessarily think that narrative that may exist in traditional technology exists in the crypto sector. If you go on platforms like Clubhouse, you'll see, you know, various rooms dedicated to Black crypto enthusiasts, including one called Black Bitcoin Billionaires. So I don't necessarily know that that narrative carries through into this particular sector.
Well, I have more, but I want to open if you all have yours, please.
Self-declared Bitcoin maximalist.
There you go.
So, from that frame, if I could touch on the hope question that was asked, I feel that I know you've got limited time, but I feel that you may have neglected the aspect of Bitcoin being scarce, inflation-proof, non-confiscatable, as opposed to because there's discussion around intergenerational wealth, which can be eroded at least through inflation, at least through confiscation, which is arguable that Bitcoin may be a mitigation against. Could you touch on that?
I don't think Bitcoin can't be confiscated. You've seen evidence of that time and time again. If you are a bad actor and you do something bad, and the FBI or MI6 is coming after, they have the capabilities, they're sophisticated enough to actually track that down. And, you know, they don't tell us what means they use, but in some cases I think they're probably hacking, I think they're hacking it somehow, or finding some other way to actually get access. But we've seen in the last couple of years, you know, authorities confiscating people's digital assets, and most of them have been Bitcoin. So I think that that's not correct. As in terms of inflation proof, yes, that was the belief, but with the recent market turmoil, we see the very, very high correlation between Bitcoin and equity, the equity markets, and people believe it's because there's been an increase in uptake from institutional investors, and so they're behaving in the same way in both markets and taking the market down. So yeah, that was the belief until recently. So I think those two things are actually not correct at this point in time.
EJ, I wonder if you could say a bit more about how you think regulation, legislation might change this picture that you've painted going forward. Who are going to be some of the major players? Is it going to be the US government? Is it going to be other governments? How will that?
Well, yeah, there's no comprehensive regulatory framework, but regulation does exist for certain parts. In the US, the debate is mostly whether something is a security or not. In the UK has essentially, which is the FCA, has essentially let the market just do whatever. You know, it's not regulating any of the currencies, it's regulating market participants, but it's regulating market participants only for anti-money laundering purposes, and it's not regulating a whole bunch of them. And the ones that it's not regulating are the ones that are offshore, but still they're able to offer their services to UK consumers. So it's actually leaving UK consumers exposed, I think. The US, of course, takes the opposite view that, you know, if you're offering stuff to even one US customer, you're caught. And so that's why, and the US also is a big market, which is why it's super important. But I think what you see in both the UK and the US is governments looking to actually put in place frameworks to essentially protect consumers, but also to encourage. They're very, if you look at Biden's executive order from a couple months ago, and then also the UK Treasury's, John Glenn's statement, I think about a month ago also, both countries want the crypto sector to thrive within their jurisdictions. The question is, what is the regulation going to look like? But where you have situations where a lot of the legislators don't even understand the technology, you know, I think we should be fearful as to what they put in place if they're not educated. So which is one of the things that I think we seek to do within the digital economy. So it's about education as well. Because I think we saw in the aftermath of the last financial crisis with the derivatives regulation, because that market previously was unregulated. And then they put in a lot of regulation that just didn't work. And why? Because they didn't understand it, but they put something in anyway. So we don't want that in this sector. But I think that what's coming from both governments, and you see that in other governments around the world, but I mostly focus on the US and the UK. They're both trying to welcome the crypto sector because for them it means jobs, it means tax revenue, it means a lot of things, and I think that's the right stance, but the question is, the devil will be in the details, for sure.
So with, thank you for the question, thank you both. So with the lack of financial literacy in this community we're talking about, and with the lack of access to technology, what do we do for digital financial literacy? Is there a way, is there like, if legislators are missing it, people who are mostly impacted in this moment and in poverty, is there a way to do a 1, 2, 3 kind of a guide to say, this is what it is, this is what it looks like, this is how to become engaged with this? Does your institute want to do a simple app that will allow people to understand it? How do you get it down to the people on the streets, everyday people, to understand?
Well, I think people have to want to be engaged. That's number one. But I think there are resources out there. A lot of the exchanges, put resources out there for people to be able to learn about this. But I think, we have mechanisms now that we didn't have 10 years ago. We have Twitter, right? We have Facebook. People are learning stuff from these various technological platforms, and there's a lot about crypto that is already out there. Most people in the world have mobile phones, cell phones. Most people do, and that's, I think we underestimate how much mobile phones have penetrated different communities, even some of the most impoverished communities in the world. And I think so the solutions to alleviate some of the suffering has to come from technologies, from things that actually will enable people to do a lot on their phones.
Maybe a TikTok jingle or something.
Yeah. Yeah, look how popular TikTok is. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. You again.
Bitcoin maximalist. Strong interest in the Bitcoin as a reserve idea. So my question is, do we need consumers to understand a technology? Very often you just use a technology based on good marketing. So my question is whether you have a view on the layer 2 type technologies like the Lightning networks that are just coming about, which means that someone can just use their credit card, debit card, buy something in a store the way they would usually buy something in a store, but it's using cryptocurrency underneath it instead of pounds, sterling, etc. underneath it as well.
Well, I haven't seen, well, the Lightning Network is supposed to make this, because Bitcoin, one of the reasons why it can't be used, the Bitcoin technology, blockchain can't necessarily be used for everyday purposes, is because it's extremely slow. And so the Lightning Network is on top of it to actually try to speed it up. It's not there yet, but I think in relation to the credit cards, that's a lot of fiat. And so they're doing the conversion somewhere else, and so what you're, at the point of sale, it's essentially fiat, so dollars, pounds, that's what I haven't seen any credit cards where you're actually paying for stuff using cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, so there's a payment, for one example, there's a service called Strike. So at spot, point of sale, it converts crypto to fiat.
Yeah, right before, yes.
But you're getting out of the fiat system and into the Bitcoin system.
Really, you still need the rail. You need the on-ramp, off-ramp. And you just described off-ramp, right?
Yeah.
You just described it. So no, I think it can't stand on its own. You still need on-ramps and off-ramps to the traditional financial system. I don't think any of this is yet ready to stand on its own.
Yeah, so the question I'm answering is, or addressing, is whether there's hope by enabling a different currency which is not as inflationary as fiat currency, such that you just use fiat currency as working capital, and the rest of the time
Absolutely.
you use another currency.
The future, we can do anything in the future if we can figure it out. But yeah, absolutely. But I don't think it exists yet.
Any questions on that?
Yes. So we have a participant who's asking us if you could offer any comments about the social aspect of crypto. They write that we see a subculture associated with GameStop and AMC, and there is a rising tide of retail interest while using crypto. Is there a way that you can use these platforms to make some sort of a political statement, to express your general discontentment with the structure that you exist in?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think one thing we didn't discuss were decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs. And I'll give you an example. When the Ukrainian war broke out, there was the creation of Ukraine DAO, which essentially was seeking to raise money, and all of it was crypto for Ukraine. And that was a political, and it was actually founded by the Pussy Riot women who, ran afoul of Vladimir Putin. So that was a political that was a political act, so to say, in a way. So yeah, you can.
And how do we encourage more of that?
If we should. But do you need encouragement? Because it's succeeding, right? When you see examples of things that are succeeding, then you know that people use it for different things. So I don't know that people necessarily need encouragement to do things that they want to do, as long as it's not illegal, right? Yeah, sure, it should be encouraged, but I don't think people should wait for that encouragement before they do whatever it is that they want to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned as we talk about this as a potential of lessening the divide. If the vast knowledge of understanding and becoming engaging with it is left to the individual, would that create more of a challenge? And to that end, as we're creating e-citizenship, right, we're electronic citizens for the most part at this point, should there be very defined digital governance?
You mean from the, sorry, could you explain?
From the government. Should government become more engaged with this?
I think so. I think so. But hey, if the government doesn't understand it, how can they? Yeah, I think so. I think governments should, and some governments are resistant to it. A number of countries around the world have essentially banned Bitcoin and its ilk. But I think, I'm not here to criticize any government. They do what they feel is best. But I think once a government realizes that this is not going anywhere, they can ban it and it'll still be around. And I think thinking about the potential benefits, I think there should be education. They should be kind of looking for ways to educate their population about the benefits. And I think if we look at the Bahamas again and how it's trying to educate its people, how it's trying to get to people, and I think that they're doing this partially because they're a country in the Caribbean that has been hit by hurricanes, and the devastation that it causes, the people that are cut off from access to anything. That was their motivating factor. But the way they're looking to educate the population, I think that's a good example of what governments can do to educate its population about the technology and the benefits of the technology. But I think also at the same time, people, because some of the discussions around what the Bahamas did, which is essentially creating a central bank digital currency, there are people who are resistant to it, and that's probably because of the potential for the intrusion into the lives of people, so privacy issues, which is essentially one of the things that people have, issues that people have with the version of central bank digital currency that China is creating, because it has the ability, they can basically punish, if the whole country adopts it, basically if they want to punish somebody, they can basically put a stop to all their, everything that they have in their wallet, and then that person has no access to, funds. That's the potential. They can actually monitor things that you buy, and it's an invasion, potentially an invasion of privacy. So that's also a debate that's still being had, so I don't necessarily know. And that's something that I think the US and the UK, they're both considering. Most governments haven't made the decision as to whether they're going to issue a central bank digital currency, and in some cases they're only looking at it, or the reason why they're mostly looking at it is because they don't want to fall behind in terms of vis-a-vis other countries. And I think that's one of the reasons probably why the US is looking at it, because if all of a sudden somebody else comes with something that displaces the dollar, that's not good. But there are a lot of issues that haven't been resolved in relation to some of these things.
Any idea why Nigeria has become so invested in?
Funny enough, crypto is banned in Nigeria. Yes, but yeah, I see Nigeria as very much like China. They both banned cryptocurrencies, and they're both looking at central bank digital currencies. It doesn't make sense. And then the Securities and Exchange Commission categorized some central bank digital currencies as security. Sorry, not central bank, but crypto as securities. But at the same time, it's banned. But I access the inflationary pressures, perhaps access some of the things we've already talked about. But why Nigeria of any other country in the world is any other country in Africa or elsewhere is number 2? I don't know, because some of the reasons that I just gave apply to other countries as well.
Just 2 things, thinking about the Bahamas. One was, is there any benefit to a country being first all in?
Bragging rights.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, what?
Bragging rights.
Okay. But is there any financial benefit, I suppose? And then the other question, because you mentioned hurricanes, and I think, Keith, you might have mentioned also potential environmental costs, which also could be unevenly distributed around the world. In fact, they are. We know there is, real cultural injustice and environmental injustice there. I mean, what would your comments be also about the literal physical technology and its impact globally?
So essentially Bitcoin and the current Ethereum 1.0, so to say. But there are lots of crypto and there are lots of crypto currencies that are actually they're basically consensus mechanism. And I know I'm using lingo here, I'm trying not to. It is basically based on what they call a proof of stake, so it doesn't use the energy that, so Bitcoin essentially is the culprit, but people kind of just talk about crypto generally. Bitcoin and Ethereum is trying to move away from that whole mechanism that actually is energy intensive. And the reason why these are energy intensive is because you have to use computers to solve mathematical problems too. And then the computers, of course, use energy and they need to be cooled. So it's a combination of all that. And as the years have gone by, people have had to, in order to actually make money off of this, you've had to, they have what they call, they have basically huge warehouses where they're storing lots and lots of computers. And so that uses a lot of electricity. That's an issue, but when you compare it to the energy that's used by the current financial system, they use lots of energy too. It's not to excuse it, but I think it's to contextualize it, right? So it's not the only thing out there using lots of energy. And and ultimately you'll have to compare it to the benefit that you're getting out of it, which I don't think people are seeing right now. But to the extent that it actually does help in terms of increasing financial inclusion, doing some of these other things that we discussed, then the fact that it uses a lot of electricity vis-a-vis something else, I think you'll have to kind of weigh the cost and benefits and determine if going forward people continue to use Bitcoin. But at a certain point, which you kind of alluded to, you won't be able to mine Bitcoin anymore. Because right now I think it's at, it's close to 19 million, and the cap is 21 million. So at some point in time, you're not going to be able to mine Bitcoin anymore. Ethereum, which is the second largest, is transitioning from the whole proof of work to proof of stake. And a lot of the other currencies, and I guess in the future there'll be more, are actually using a mechanism that doesn't use as much energy.
Hi, thank you. So I think Nigeria is a really interesting example because I'm curious about basically digital currencies emerging from central banks. And I think Nigeria might be doing this. I know China has done this, and you already brought up how people have concerns around it kind of moving away to social credit systems. But I guess, what do you see as, what types of institutions or protections can be put in place to prevent not just social credit systems, but digital authoritarianism around these technologies?
Wow, okay. Well, how do you, well, I think one way, because there are multiple ways, there are a couple of ways that a country could roll out central bank digital currencies. They could roll it out and basically have people, you and me, directly have accounts at the central bank. Or they can roll it out in a way that they will, again, use intermediaries. The same intermediaries we're using now, banks, right? There's a debate about that. And I don't think that any central bank right now wants the responsibility of having, millions of people having accounts, because they're not structured that way. They've basically fought for generations and farmed out the anti-money laundering checks, all the different checks that they have to do to the banking sector, which when you try to open a bank account, you go through a process, right? And they could always say no, right? And there are people who they said who can't access the financial system. But at the same time, I know it's using intermediaries again, but maybe those intermediaries might be able to help in terms of preventing abuses by governments in the same way that they prevent, I think they prevent abuses by the government, because the government doesn't know, I believe that the government doesn't know, when I take $1 or £1 out of my account, unless I've committed a crime and it's flagged and it goes up the system. But maybe that's one way of dealing with it. But then, again, it's putting intermediaries in place where the whole thing started, because people wanted to get rid of intermediaries. So it's a discussion. Everything is a discussion here, so I don't have an answer for sure.
Any more questions?
We would like to take on that question. So one of our participants is asking us, given that cryptocurrency cannot realistically be used as a flat currency in any country, how can it be possible to use it to address poverty as a mean, instead of, how can we counter people or organizations who just want to transfer money from rich countries to poorer countries? How do we sort of deal with something like that happening?
But what's wrong with transferring money from rich countries to poor countries?
I'm assuming
Oh, no, that's my question to whoever. I don't think there's anything wrong with transferring money from rich countries to poor countries, as long as you're doing it for legal purposes. It's not for terrorist financing, etc. But I think Bitcoin is legal tender in 2 countries in the world, El Salvador and the Central African Republic. I don't know if Bitcoin was the right thing because of the volatility within Bitcoin, but we talked about stable coins and we talked about CBDCs. There's stable coins that exist out there. There's Tether, there's USDC that have not imploded, and that's a way of transferring. There's also Ripple, right? It's not a stable coin, it's the type of cryptocurrencies, and the whole premise of Ripple was to be able to enable cross-border payments from one person to another. So I think and then with minimal cost, right? And I think people are looking forward to a day where there will be zero cost, and that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any more questions from out there? Okay. So I'm going to shift just a little bit. We know that you were one of the judges with the Powerless.
Yes.
You have been. And which features, celebrates leading figures in African and Caribbean heritage, working in health, business, science, art. In 2020, it gave its top honor to Jackie Wright, who's the corporate vice president and chief digital officer for Microsoft. Does this in any way convey that to Black Britons that Blacks are really not being left out of the digital space? That someone like Jackie Wright is leading this for Microsoft, because there's also this idea that we're not in a digital space.
Well, that's a difficult one. Just because one person has made it doesn't mean. But Jackie will actually tell you, and actually if you listen to interviews she gave at the time, I think this is October last year, she told CNN that I had to leave Britain to actually get to where I got to, which is very telling, don't you think? That she had to leave Britain. She's a British woman, and she had to leave Britain to do everything that she did to become a corporate vice president. So it does say something about the society, but I wasn't born and raised here, so I didn't go through the system. But if she, who has gone through the system, is saying this, then I think people need to pay attention and figure out what it is that is going on within the institutions that wouldn't enable a brilliant mind like Jackie Wright to have risen through the system that she had to go to the United States. And the United States is not Mecca or anything, but that she had to go to the United States to make it.
Sure. So there's a lot that we've discussed here. I'm of the age where I have been taught to go to YouTube to watch the clip on how to do anything. Should we find a way, you and I, hopefully this will help, to make this deliverable to the everyday person who isn't trained in economics and policy and law? Is there something that we could do to bring to bear what digital currency is and how to engage with it? And if so, what do you think would be the top 3 things that we should look to do?
I think institutions have a role to play. I don't believe in looking to the government for everything. I think governments have a role to educate their people, but when it doesn't, I think institutions should be, institutions like this, should be doing that, because their whole role in society is to educate, right? So whether you're paying for something like this, I think it should be whether you're paying fees to them or not. I think, but the issue that I find is, again, the lack of understanding within the institutions themselves. People don't understand this, and I've marveled at how, I guess I didn't know. I started on my crypto education journey back in 2017. So now I didn't, and the more I've talked to people over the last year, I didn't realize how many people just don't understand it, but there are lots of people that don't. And there are lots of people in institutions that don't. I haven't heard of a center within any UK university that's dedicated to this, but there should be. There should be more than
Digital
one.
Economic Institute will do.
The Digital Economic Institute is not a public body.
Okay.
Yes, we want to educate, for sure. We want to educate, but I think the people that a university can possibly reach, that would be way more than, because it has students, who, in order, they have a captive audience, right, for one. And then they can go out to the communities where they exist, like the community around this institution. They can go to the communities and educate people on it.
So
But
this means that you could actually come and teach a course.
I'd love to.
Okay.
I'd love to. But yeah, I think universities have a role to play, and I think it's not just here; it's also in the United States. I've only heard of 2 universities in the United States that actually no, there's 3 now. Universities in the United States that actually offer instruction on this, and I think there should be a lot more, because this is going to be part of our future, and the fact that we're educating people and we're not educating them on this, that's going to potentially have a significant role in our future lives, I think is not good.
Which were those universities? Is that Harvard?
MIT, Harvard, Stanford, there may be a couple more.
Well, thank you so much for your valuable time.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
To share this and enlighten us. I do believe that there's a way forward with crypto and digital currency to eradicate poverty. I believe that there's enough power in the economy now to end poverty today if the right people and governments chose to do so, not to just minimize it. But there is enough wealth in the world that no one would be poor and that everyone would have fair, equal access to everything from housing to healthcare, and that it's realistic. Everyone may not be wealthy, but everyone can certainly live outside the context of poverty.
Well, I believe everybody has a right to housing and food and education, but you can have all that and still be poor.
Absolutely. So, but there's a way to create it so that you're above the poverty line, but that'll be part 2. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for tuning